Hi, welcome everybody to today's amazing global panel called Technology, People, and HR. My name is Tatjana. I'm founder and CEO of TNT Consulting, and I have the pleasure of moderating this panel today. I'd like to introduce you to these amazing rock stars who will really blow you away with their insights, their experience, and their expertise in these areas. And allow me to introduce them as I see them on the screen, starting with Robert Brown on the top left side of my screen. Robert Brown is the Vice President of the Center for the Future of Work at Cognizant Technology Solutions. He is a strategist and researcher, and since 2014, he's been focusing on market strategy and worked extensively with the Cognizant's Business Accelerator leadership to drive the development of its intelligent automation strategy, messaging, and go-to-market outreach. Prior to joining Cognizant, Rob has served as Managing Vice President of the Business and Application Services team at Gartner and has had positions at Hewlett-Packard and the British House of Commons. He is the lead author on several groundbreaking white papers, including The Robot and I, and has co-authored 21 Jobs of the Future, a guide to getting and staying employed over the next 10 years. He is currently working on his next book, The 21 HR Jobs of the Future. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Thank you so much for being with us. Next is Duena Blomstrom. Duena is the CEO and co-founder of PeopleNotTech, a revolutionary machine learning-powered software solution that utilizes proprietary algorithms to redefine team formation, diagnose and improve team health, and provides instant feedback to team leaders about their team's psychological safety. Duena is also author, keynote speaker, angel investor, and a mentor for various incubators and accelerators. She is the author of the book Emotional Banking, Fixing Culture, Leveraging FinTech, and Transforming Retail Banks into Brands. With a background in psychology as well as business, Joanna is on a crusade to see lasting, meaningful, and profound change in the way organizations work. She's a Forbes contributor and named industry influencer in most lists, including LinkedIn Top Voice. Welcome, Joanna.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being with us. Let me introduce you to Tom Davenport. Tom is the President's Distinguished Professor of IT and Management at Babson College, a digital fellow of the MIT Initiative of the Digital Economy, co-founder of the International Institute for Analytics, and a senior advisor to Deloitte's Analytics and Cognitive Practice. Tom has been a professor at several universities, including Harvard, and a consultant or partner at several leading consulting firms like McKinsey and EY. He is a teacher, researcher, writer, and has written, co-authored, or edited 20 books, including the vastly popular one, Competing on Analytics, The New Science of Winning. He's a renowned speaker about the impacts of information technology on people and organizations, and has been awarded, amongst many other accolades, Top Tech Voice on LinkedIn, #1 Voice for Education on LinkedIn, and Top 50 Business School Professors in the world. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Tatjana. Happy to be here.
And last but not least, Lisa Sterling. Lisa is Executive Vice President and Chief People and Culture Officer at Ceridian, a global human capital management technology company. In her role, she leads the organization's global people strategy, combined with leading the vision on the Dayforce talent management offering. She has a broad range of expertise covering the entire people experience, as well as talent management technology. Prior to joining Ceridian, Lisa ran the Talent Technology Solutions organization at Mercer. She is one of the rare, immensely inspiring role models of business leaders transitioning successfully from product, business development, and sales roles into the HR and people field. Since starting her role at Ceridian in 2016, she has picked up some of the most coveted industry awards for her work, including HR Superstar Award and the HR Executive of the Year Award. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for being with me. As I told you, dear audience, this is a rockstar panel. We are super excited to talk about global technology, people, and HR, and share some wisdom of these experts with you. Now, let's demystify the subject a little And the first question I'd like to start with Tom. How and where do you see technology impact and influence the HR people work in organization? And is that a good or a bad thing for our people?
Do I have the whole hour to respond? It's a big subject.
I wish you did.
I think there's several different types of technology that are really reshaping the role of HR in organizations. I mean, one is that we've had technology for the last decade and a half or so that measures and records human performance data of various types, and that means that we can start to analyze and predict that sort of data. So you get a fair number of leading HR organizations starting to think about people analytics, Google probably being one of the first and the most aggressive about it, but there are more and more of these. And I just got another ad for the Wharton People Analytics Conference, so this is a pretty popular field. And then increasingly you have technology for automating and redesigning work, specifically artificial intelligence in its various forms. And that, I think, is obviously growing quite rapidly in organizations. HR, at least in my experience, not really taking the lead much in thinking about what that means for work. There are a few reskilling programs that some organizations have announced, but not nearly enough in my view. And then the third category is, we're experiencing it today, it's sort of technology for workplace redesign. And obviously, given what's happening with a certain virus in the world today, I think a lot of us are wishing that organizations had more of that kind of thing, obviously for remote work and for gig work and all sorts of ways to transform the workplace. And again, I don't think HR is terribly visible in that domain as well. So lots of opportunity, I guess, is the good way to look at it.
Thank you, Tom. Dear panel, please feel free to chip in as you see fit, and just take it away. Who would like to add to this?
Well,
This is Rob. I'll jump in really quick. I think that in terms of the role of HR and technology, one of the big things that we're going to have to figure out is using technology to, the way that we talk about it is sort of the art of the job and the science of the job. And the technology is really, really good at heavy computation, helping people get to things like next best actions, or doubling down on their ability to be empathetic. And people, if we think about the future of work, a lot of the focus that we think people are going to be thinking about is how do they double down on what we call the 3 C's. So coaching, connecting, and caring in the work that they do in the future. And so I look at a lot of the technologies that we see today, from very just rote and repetitive technology that even we use in our own work at Cognizant and many of other competitors, things like robotic process automation technology that take away that rote and repetitive task-based work and help people really focus on the things that make them human. I've done a ton of research the last couple of years on augmented reality and virtual reality, and one of the number one burnout factors, to give an example, for doctors and nurses is paperwork. And so a decade ago, in the workflow that doctors and nurses were doing, we instituted the electronic medical record. The industry instituted EMRs in the doctor's office, but it's still the same work. You're just substituting it with a tablet or a computer. And so now with augmented reality, one of the really interesting pieces of technology that I'm seeing is there's a startup called Augmetics, which is you're in the doctor's office with the doctor, they're having the conversation with you, and a natural language processing algorithm is actually incepting that doctor's discussion with you, what's wrong with you, what's happening. They can be empathetic, and it's basically pre-populating that electronic medical record for you. And they still have to verify it with a check. But I think that's sort of a great example of having, sort of a parallel swim lane of work processes that help doctors and nurses be with patients, be present with patients, as opposed to dealing with things like the rote and repetitive aspects of paperwork. I find that really exciting.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing this example. Was it Lisa or Duena who wanted to chip in next?
We both jumped, but I suppose it doesn't really matter. We'll all get there. I'll take it for a second, Lisa, if that's all right. I think both gentlemen have touched on really interesting topics. It's really complex for many reasons. We haven't really had the chance to have enough time to put together the human side and the technology side for long enough. This is new for everyone. We're all learning on the job. HR, it's a bigger topic, and I am trying to stay very positive, but HR doesn't seem to have led the way, as Tom has put it to a degree, in this regard. What I would say is it's really interesting to make a distinction between HR software and like people software, or the terminology around the technology in the area of HR makes a big difference. And we found this kind of the hard way, if you wish, in our journey as a small startup. When we started, we did think we were people tech, right? And we did do a lot of research on what else people tech there was out there, and to my shock, there wasn't much of anything. I would have thought, having been out of the field for long enough, that when I returned 20 years later, there would be a software that read people's minds and would be able to have a next best action regarding their emotions. There was none of that. A lot of the software I was seeing that was PeopleSoft was essentially, very, very near to payroll. A lot nearer to payroll than I would have liked it to be in terms of analytics and understanding data about humans. But we consciously made a departure from the term of PeopleSoft, and we put ourselves in the realm of being a work tool, because I think it makes a really big difference whether we separate HR topics from day-to-day work topics. And I think we shouldn't be doing that at all. I think we need to find ways in which whatever type of software we make is essentially part of this new world of work. And what are the new ways of work? And how do people change the way they think and they feel at work, so that they can kind of avail themselves of lean, of agile, of working remotely, of servant leadership, of all the amazing things that are going to come with this fast technology world. So as soon as we understand what it is that we need to be doing in the workplace, then we need to make software that helps them with those work bits, and then augment it with humans. I mean, it sounds simple, but it isn't. But realistically, because of what we have traditionally regarded as HR soft, I just think that category needs to go to heaven faster than not, because what we do need is things that will help people in their day-to-day work. So, from our perspective, we are just another work tool, just as a Zoom conference would be a work tool, just as a Slack channel would be a work tool, just as a Trello board or a Jira. There's no reason for things that help humans from an emotional point of view and from a relationship point of view not to be one of these big themes that they use in terms of technology.
Thanks so much, Joanna. We'll dig deeper definitely into those topics as we progress in this hour. Lisa.
Yeah, so here's what my point of view. I spend a great deal of time talking to CHROs at other organizations, and I think HR gets a little bit of a bad rap. There are a lot of progressive HR organizations out there that look at technology as an enabler and not a disruptor. The reality is technology is not HR's responsibility. It's an organizational strategy that we all need to think about in terms of how it impacts our business across the different areas. And it's not industry specific. You see industries like manufacturing where there's a lot more robotic process automation or robotics entering into there, similar to the healthcare organization. I joke, I had a surgery in January and I had 2 surgeons and a robot. I recovered significantly faster because there was a robot involved in facilitating my medical treatment. So I think we have to be careful about generalizing the way that we've combined HR and technology. And I think that from my experience, that the challenge that we run into is a lot of organizations are simply really slow to adapt new capabilities. I have 3 daughters, one who's entering the workforce this fall, And she expects to have the exact same experience at work as she does in her personal life. So do I. I'm not a millennial or a Gen Z, but I want the same capabilities in my work life and the same types of experiences here that I do at home. And so while it's important to have AI and other things like that for HR, you got to start with the employee experience first. You got to go down to where the action is, where the lowest paid employees are, and make sure you're enabling them to do their work extremely successfully from wherever it is, because we know work is not where you go, it's what you do. And we got to make sure that we're starting there. I think we get too caught up in, we've got to arm HR with all this technology and enable them. You got to start at that lowest common denominator first, because the employee and workplace experience, as Tom mentioned, is absolutely the most instrumental to organizational success.
Thanks for that, Lisa. I think it's a great segue to the next question, which we have prepared, which is a reality check. So how do you see the people or HR function being prepared? Is it well prepared or not to handle this future of work? And if yes, can you share examples? But if not, what would you see are the biggest roadblocks or issues you see or experience today? Do you want to continue, Lisa, and then we hand over to others?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm not gonna make a broad generalization that says yes or no. I think there are absolutely progressive organizations out there that are, and they've realized that the future of work is now. It's not sometime in the future. I mean, the gig economy is taking over, and we keep talking about things being alternative in the future. It's here and now, and it's going to become more the normal. I think where we have opportunity to continue to improve is to start thinking further out. I mean, the World Economic Forum just posted a research study that said 65% of the children in elementary school right now will hold jobs that don't even exist today. That's pretty alarming when you think of how rapid those kids are going to go through school, university, and come into the workforce. And to think that those jobs aren't even defined yet, we've got to be faster to adopt. And if we continue to be as slow as we are, the companies who aren't progressive are going to fall behind. You've got prime examples of that all over the world. You know, Nokia was so slow to realize that telephones weren't about communication through telephonic, it was all about data. You look at Blockbuster, they literally have no stores anymore because Netflix came in and they were too slow to adopt to that philosophy. We've got to be thinking far more progressively and into the future. But I think the organizations that get it are doing an exceptional job. And if you look at their performance, both on the stock exchanges or just in general, they're outperforming their counterparts because they are leveraging those technology platforms to drive a superior employee experience.
One of the things that I'd just add to those great comments, Lisa, is you talked about what do the jobs look like that we'll have in the future that maybe we haven't even identified yet. We published a couple of pieces, 21 jobs of the future and 21 more jobs of the future. And in fact, I think, Tatjana, you opened up saying, I'm currently working on 21 HR jobs of the future, really kind of focus on like how do we move the needle in HR to really align with strategy. And so I think that's really important. So, the future of work is now, but part of that timeline is sort of like, in 2030, what are some of the jobs that we may have not even thought of? And pertinent to HR is things like, what if we had like an algorithm bias auditor? Statutorily, if the US FTC or the European Commission, next year said, we have a no black box rule, and these algorithms are competitive to all of your businesses, but they have to be ethical and 100% transparent. That's going to become a role of somebody that is job that's not defined yet. We can start to see the outlines of it. Or other things like, we talk about education and training, and we're going to talk a little bit about that a little bit more. It's something like a uni for life coordinator within the HR function is going to be incredibly impactful to move the needle to get HR at the seat, at the front and center of the strategy of the firm. So I think, going back to my days as a Gartner analyst, HR was sort of the poster child of the sclerotic, ossified, unchanging back office process of most businesses. And Lisa, as you said, there's a lot of people that are out on the vanguard, sort of Renaissance CHROs that get it, that their role is really to be the lever to drive strategy for the company, because the future of work is now, it's today, it's happening.
But just to add to that, Rob, in my work with Deloitte, I have actually come across several algorithm bias auditors, and they'd like to extend their work into auditing that sort of thing in addition to auditing financial performance. But I agree that there are some leading edge organizations. I was talking to some people at IBM last week, and I must say I was very impressed by all the ways that they're eating their own AI dog food to predict what kinds of learning and development individuals might benefit from, and who might perform well and who might attrit, and all these kinds of things. And obviously they use some of their own technologies to facilitate work. But I worry a little bit. The technology is moving so much faster than HR. You wonder how many organizations will say, "Do I really need HR anymore? Can I get this done with algorithms and RPA and various other tools rather than a function to do it?" It seems to me if they don't engage more quickly, and not a few exceptions, but the bulk of HR organizations, then I fear a little bit for the future of the function.
So that I suppose my turn to be horrible, because everyone who's ever read anything that I said about HR would know that that's possibly the position I have, which is absolutely only with far less elegance, but HR won't be around at all unless they wake up, in my view. I think HR needs to move from admin and legal to being a counselor Troy that's a really valuable function to anyone, where they comprehend emotions, they give people permission to be human at work, they understand the types of mentality change that the new ways of work take, and then attempt to do that for the organization, that they kind of repair the trust between the organization and the humans. There's loads of jobs for HR to be done, and none of them are payroll or figuring out who should go on vacation. It's just, every time I think about it, my blood pressure rises. I probably shouldn't, and it isn't really my job to be that agitated about it, but it feels like we are facing a serious big job, and HR is just not picking any of it up. And I wonder why that is, because if you look at it about, I don't know, is it 5-7 years ago, when the topic of becoming an HR business partner was being circulated, right? There was a lot more elevation, sorry about the various noises here. There was a lot more elevation in the role of HR in an organization than you see today. So there's a lot more discussion on maybe we just don't need them anymore. Whereas I think this is the time to step up and look at the big themes. I mean, we need humans to completely change the way they think if we're going to be doing agile. That's a big job. We need humans to be given permission to be emotional at work, or else their jobs are going to be taken away. That's a big job. There are really serious things that HR needs to deal with, and I still see dialogue on compensation, on retention, on, kind of satisfaction, you name it, just things like from 2002, and we can't be doing that anymore. So I think there's serious urgency for HR to pick up the pace in general. But with that said, what Lisa said is very true. There are high performers out there that are comprehending that there are new jobs to be had. Sadly, I see those HR-like jobs being grabbed by CTOs and COOs and chief risk officers and people that understand that unless they deal with their people issue, it doesn't matter what they do with their technology, it doesn't matter what they do with their strategy, they have got to step up on these topics. And those are, I mean, if you look these days, and quick segue into where I'm obsessed about, if you look these days on where the conversation and the dialogue resides in terms of the one topic that's going to change how we work, which is psychological safety, that comes from the DevOps community, that comes from the technology side of things. That's not something that was brought to the table by HR. And it is one of the biggest levers of change in an organization. I could go on about this all day, but I just think HR needs to wake up quick because there's big jobs to be done.
So Tatjana, can I just add on, because Duena made some relevant points there. So one of the things that we are starting to see specifically around the CHRO is a massive switch, and I apologize if you're going to ask a question about this, and I'm jumping ahead here, but we have to think differently about who is in that role. I mean, if you look at this philosophy of the G3, which there's a lot of talk around right now, your CEO, your CFO, and your CHRO are the three most important jobs at an organization. The CHRO CHRO in many of these organizations are not lifelong HR professionals. They are people similar to myself who have grown up in sales and product and operations, and they have a much broader understanding of what it takes to make an organization successful. I'm not suggesting you can't be successful as a lifelong HR professional in that role, but to the points that Duena just made, part of the reason why HR sometimes gets the rap that they do and is not seen as forward and progressive and keeping up with the times is because they don't have the broader perspective. And so as we look to a future and we think about what are the things that people can take away and think about, you got to think about who are the right people to put in the CHR role. And they're not always people who have lived in the HR function. Sometimes that's actually a detriment to the organization because they don't know how the company makes money. They don't understand what their total available market share is. They don't understand the fundamentals of organizational and business performance. I'm generalizing, but I think that is something that as we start to go forward progressively, we used to talk about the proverbial seat at the table. It's not about a seat anymore. It's about having the right human there that has a strong voice that is backed by the intellectual capital and knowledge that they need to help the CEO and the CFO run the organizational successfully through their people strategy.
Thanks for that, Lisa. I think it's super powerful and important to raise that fact. And then it's coming beautifully to the next question, certainly, which is about enablement. So now we've been hard on some of the HR folks out there. Let's give them a glimpse of hope. Let's talk about enablement. So what would be your number one advice to the HR people organization, or actually companies in general, to address the future of work? And how can they really embark on the journey by being the leaders and not the followers? Any thoughts on that?
Nobody wants to pick it
No,
up.
no. This is the question du jour. This is the future of work. It's where the rubber hits the road for the future of work. I mean, I think, a lot of things we've been talking about is like, what are the things that HR can do if it really breaks down its function? And, things like benefits administration and payroll, they're very, they sort of follow their own algorithm. And so then HR is in the exception management business. And so I think that leaves, what we used to call education and training is now very much around learning and development. How can we use this rich panoply of tools that we have around distance learning or, massively open online coursework, all of those tools that are available to us now to be able to enrich learning and development. That, I think, is the future of HR. I think the other thing that enablement is going to entail is that, again, these sort of CHROs, the Renaissance HR practitioners, need to understand sort of where we're coming from in the past and where we're going to in the future. And that bespeaks that alignment with strategy that I talked about for the firm. If you're a bank, if you're a hotel company, an entertainment firm, a mom and pop pet shop, every company needs to know where the future is going. And so one of the things that we've written a lot about is this notion of from and to in the future of work. So the tools that we use at work, the issues that we face at work, the places of work, and sort of purpose of work. And, a lot of millennials and Gen Zs, not to generalize, talk about the purpose of the work that they're doing. And that goes beyond a lot of the traditional things that have been sort of levers for the HR function. And it also gets into things like engagement or lack thereof. I mean, some of the statistics that you hear on American business of engagement versus unengagement versus actively unengaged, which means that people are actually trying to sabotage your company, are pretty astonishing. And so again, if I had to really pick on a lever for enablement, it would be how do we dig into things like education and training and learning and development to tap into that purpose and get from here to there. And that means the future of work.
I think you bring up a lot of really good points there. And as we talk about, Rob, there's so much noise in the system about all of these different, and I hate this word, generations in the workforce. This isn't a generational issue. This is truly being better at thinking about all of the different divergent employee experiences that we need to be able to encapsulate in the entire employee experience. And you bring up the skills gap. I mean, as I look at L&D organizations all the time, we are so slow to realize that learning and education doesn't come through going through webinars or training solely. It's about experience. It's about education, actually doing the job. It's about exposure. And I think if we're going to get to a point where we can close the skill gap and get to being able to address those jobs that you're writing about that don't even exist today, we really have to tap into a much more personalized approach to everything that we're doing. And it doesn't mean that we're going to meet the needs of every employee in the organization, but we have to be far more thoughtful about what that employee experience feels like for all of those different people. And there's no one size fits all approach to that. And I think that for me, as the CPCO here at Ceridian, we have very different experiences for different people, depending upon what they're trying to learn, how they're trying to learn, where they're at in their maturity of their life cycle. But as HR leaders, we have to get away from this philosophy that, certain populations of people only want certain things. We've been the ones that have created those silos by saying different generations want different things, and we've got to create all of these different experiences. That's not really how things work. My 21-year-old daughter and I learn exactly the same way. We are so similar, and I'm 26 years her elder, totally different classification. So I just think we need to have a shift in our thinking. And back to what Duena was saying, unfortunately, HR sometimes is the slowest to want to shift their thinking and how we create those personalized approaches.
Thanks, Lisa.
You're still muted, Tom.
Please.
Just related to that, if I had to pick one attribute, I'd say it is personalization, which has been talked about for a while. I mean, more than 10 years ago, I was running a research center for Accenture, and one of my researchers, Sue Cantrell, wrote a book called The Workforce of One, but I think we haven't quite achieved that yet. We need to think about, just as we start to think about personalizing our offers to customers, we personalize them to our employees. How many hours do you want to work? Where do you want to work? What kind of tasks does it make sense for you to do? How do you share those tasks with a machine? What kinds of learning and development make sense for you as an individual? What kind of tools do you need to do your work? I think we still have this kind of mass industrialized model that everybody wants the same thing. Or as Lisa suggested, maybe we think, oh, these millennials want something different. I think there's more variation within generations than there is between generations in many cases. So I think the only answer is, personalization and individualization.
Absolutely. And I think the topic of you is a big deal that we have got to start reframing around. So to my mind, I think we need to move away from discourse on the organization. I always say the organization is as real as Santa Claus. It's not a thing, right? It's not something that you can genuinely change and move. We're talking about things that look good on paper, but they have absolutely no practical application. So the faster we move away from that and we move towards you and your team, then the faster we can see changes. And at an individual level, the organization, Santa, can do things for you, but you also have to bring things to the table yourself. And we have got to re-empower our people to allow themselves to have some personal responsibility in how they grow, in what they do, so that they're better for these future of work, new types of thinking. There's a lot that needs to be done at an individual level. And I think from a company's point of view, from an HR's point of view, or any other function that wants to deal with people, if we want to see results, if we want to see something really changing, I would say this, of course, because I believe in it firmly, but the one lever of change is to look at the team, to walk away from the rhetorics of teams from the 80s, to bring it into what does it mean today, what are those levers in a team that will make that group dynamic high performance, and then focus on those, because then you can see actual change. That does encompass engagement. That does encompass a flexible way of thinking. That does mean that we help our people be curious and open and learn differently. And yes, personally, in different ways in that team of 10 or 12. I just think that the unit we need to focus on, instead of the organization or our people or the segments or the generations, has got to come back to the team, simply because then you have all of these levers of change in terms of both individual responsibility and, of course, psychological safety, which I think is the number one thing that's going to help us get performant like the guys that are doing it well.
Well, thank you all. I think this is super fascinating. One thing I would ask is, would any of you have a practical example to share coexistence, people work and technology work that you are seeing already either heading in the right direction today, or it is really there to be adopted by others? It's like ready-made off the shelf. Somebody's really crushing it. Any of that you could share would be highly appreciated.
So I'll just share something.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'll go first.
We all have so much to say. No, and mine's really quick. So one of the strategies that we've had here specifically at Ceridian, and again, we have the benefit of being a very high-tech organization. So that leads us to be very technologically focused. We very much focus our employee and workplace experience around technology, because we do believe it has a significant impact on our internal culture and the experience. And to Tom's point earlier, or Rob's point, excuse me, the engagement or disengagement of our employees. We've really started to think differently about some of the traditional things that I'm sure, Duena, make you absolutely crazy when it comes to HR, which is around payroll. So we're actually in the process of launching an entirely new philosophy and technological platform here at Ceridian called On-Demand Pay, which is where our employees, and it's not like what you see on television, it's where our employees can actually gain access to their wages as they earn them. And it's not like, hey, you can have $100. It's we're paying our people in real time the wages that they are earning as they're earning them, with all the taxation, the garnishments, everything taken out in real time. And I will tell you, you talk about HR being slow to adopt. When we launched this philosophy last year at our large customer conference, you could have heard crickets in the conference room, and there were about 3,000 people in there. And every HR leader then started, oh my gosh, there's no way you can pay people on a daily basis. Well, guess what? Uber can, Lyft can, you've got all of these gig types of workforces that get paid every single day. This is another one of those experiences where it's like, this is a competitive advantage. For Ceridian, we know if we allow our employees access to their wages as they earn them, we have a leg up over every other technology company that we're competing against who doesn't do that, because we're a place where technology and people have came together and combined, and we have figured out a way to leverage technology to impact our people and our business in a significant way that's incredibly positive. So I think that's just one small example. I know the rest of the folks here have lots of them, but again, it's changing our mindset on, well, we've always done it that way, to get rid of the box. Don't think outside the box, get rid of the box and go do something drastically different that's fundamentally going to change the way people feel about their organization that they work for.
That's really
only daily though, Lisa. I don't have that much deferred gratification. I'd like to be paid every minute if I could.
You probably could. There's no reason to say it has to be on an hourly basis or on a daily basis. But I think that makes a great point. I will tell you, we had leaders that initially come to us and say, whoa, like, how are people going to budget? Like, people are going to get to the end of a pay period, and what if they don't have any money? Well, you know what? That can happen right now. People live paycheck to paycheck all the time. And there's actually, when we were doing the study, we were looking at this. There are more day-to-day pay loan or payroll loan companies than there actually are McDonald's restaurants in the United States. That is alarming. And the reason for that is because people do live paycheck to paycheck. So the way that we're rolling this out at Ceridian is this is part of our overall wellness strategy. We're not rolling this out as a payroll experience. It's part of Live Well, Work Well, because we are now giving a financial wellness experience to our people. Not hourly, not by the minute yet, but now you're making me think a little bit differently about this.
Challenge is on.
That's an amazing point. Shouldn't it all be wellness? Shouldn't it all be, we have these humans in this organization, how do they work in the new ways, in a way that makes them happy and makes us money? It's that simple.
Absolutely.
Really, not quite, but to give you an example of what we're doing, I don't know, I'm really trying to step away from giving any kind of, I'm not trying to give you a sales pitch, but it's difficult to tell you any examples without telling you what we're doing whatsoever.
Go for it, Joanna. Go for
ahead.
it.
I have to roll and let you guys know. So what we're doing is very close to the project Aristotle, if you guys are familiar with it, really. So we're working on psychological safety, which is the one lever of change in teams. And what we do is, obviously, we have to ask people. And a lot of the work you've done on how important it is for them to see instant gratification, we've done that because we have to get them interested in telling us anything. And God knows they have enough survey burn that they don't want to at first, and they don't trust the organization. So we ask people, and we take those coordinates in so that kind of the AI starts helping them to become more empathetic, to be more open, to be resilient, to be flexible, and all those good things, right? But once we ask them, we see a lot of the issues of the organizations coming up. All of a sudden, we find out kind of where it breaks, who doesn't trust who, why they don't trust them, what has happened in the past. Every notch on that, on the trunk of that tree starts showing up as soon as we start talking about what we need to be doing. And on the other side, so we ask the employees on the one side, on the other side, we give the team leader in a closed environment, just between them and their team, a view of how their people are feeling, which is a big deal because most of these team leaders have never looked at how their people are feeling. Most of them don't really even care, but the ones that do care don't know how to look at these things. And it's a humongous shift in thinking for them to kind of start looking at emotions, comprehend what are the leads of their teams in terms of engagement, that they could get them to learn more, that they could get them to have vulnerability and be open and authentic with each other. It's a very different type of work. But what we say to them is, forget what your day job is, whether you're a project manager or a product owner or a team lead or whatever it is, your main and most important job from here on is you're going to be this new CHRO for your team. All you do is you're in charge of these people having psychological safety. It's your most important thing that's going to make you win. And it's a huge change. And what we found is software in itself, because that was the question, kind of, do they go together? This is the software we're providing, and we were hoping that we can kind of launch this. Everyone would have a copy of it in its hand, and then we never need to talk about human issues with the help of another human. That obviously doesn't work. So very recently we realized that we have to kind of find a way to marry these two. And just a few months ago, we've introduced a button called Coach Me, because there's a moment we found when these team leads, no matter how much they want to learn, they will query, they will ask, they will scratch their heads and go, I want to, but I have no idea what to do so that I make my guys be in a different mood, or so that I make my guys communicate better. And that's when they need that type of human interaction with a coach, with someone wise enough who's seen it all or has ideas. And the combination between our AI suggesting things and this coach and their willingness to use technology to see all this is, I think, the closest example we've seen of machines and humans trying to fix this issue.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. This certainly gives hope and excitement. Any other examples? We still have a few more minutes. If you wish to share, Rob or Tom, any experience?
I think what we're doing right now in this medium with Hacking HR is an incredible example of the power of technology for humans to collaborate, work with one another over time and distance. I think all of us are on the conference circuit. You know, you think about the way that we've now had to literally pivot on a dime. And so you guys, whether you liked it or not, are the poster child of how this is, you know, all of a sudden there is going to be companies that are at this very minute looking to how can we use technology to help bridge the gap in the face of a crisis that we didn't really see coming down the pike. I think another, you know, picking a real simple technology, there's so much that we have all been thinking about the last several years, predominantly around things like diversity and inclusion that's important to businesses. And gender diversity is so important. And so I look at a tool like Textio. And for the hiring and recruiting function, for, you know, if you're not familiar with it, you know, you can put through your job recs and see is the language gendered, And so when we did 21 jobs of the future, and those jobs are all written up as JDs, as job descriptions from, let's say the year 2030 or 2035, I like to think that I'm a pretty equitable person. I put my drafts through Textio. I was like, wow, that's something I hadn't even thought of. So when we think about unconscious bias, that's a tool right now today that if companies are looking to bridge the gap on their gender parity in their jobs, it's right there. It's available to use today. The last thing I would say is just in the widescreen macro. Everybody is familiar with the Dow Jones Industrial Average. We have built what we think is sort of like a Dow Jones tracking index for jobs of the future. So the Cognizant Jobs of the Future Index today. If you want to check it out, please do. And it gives a real-time insight to when the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out the job openings. Every quarter, we take that data and we've built an index of 50 jobs that we think are emblematic of the future of work. And we can see, not real time, but on a quarterly basis, how the jobs of the future are growing faster than jobs overall. And so it's nice to be able to test some of the futuristic hypotheses that we've got in real time to see how it's impacting the U.S. economy.
Thanks for sharing, Rob. We'll certainly make sure that we have that link for distribution. I think a lot of people will be super excited about it. Thank you so much. All right, let's move to our, we could talk forever, but unfortunately to our last question for today. Let's take all of this a step further. Let's talk societal impact. We all believe people in HR function has a profound impact, and also just shared an obligation on how the current and the future workforce will actually be readied and just be able to really thrive in this future. How would you want to see HR impact society? What are your thoughts on this? You want to continue, Rob, while I have you on the screen?
I think that, the future of work and all the issues that we're talking about, at their core are really at the heart of every major societal issue that's raging around the world today. So whether, it's border walls or Brexit, populism, issues around the 1%, whatever you want to name, at its heart, it's really about the distribution of the work that we're doing and sort of the fruits of that work. And so what I'd like to see in terms of the role of HR specifically is, how do we think about jobs of the future to help address some of those things? I talked about the Cognizant Jobs of the Future Index a moment ago. One of the things that we have, the index is broken up by families, and one of the 8 families encompassing those 50 jobs is the environmental space. And so we can think about things that, for us seem very macro, but things like sea level rise. And so sea level rise, well, that's going to necessarily engender the need for things like tidewater architects. And so you look at a tidewater architect and say, well, there's not too many of those around today, but if you took a bit of civil engineering capability and sort of environmental remediation and things like the horticulture space, where you can actually start to build, to develop at massive scale some of the coastal planting that would rehabilitate things like wetlands at huge scale, and put those together, it gives you a sense of what the role of a tidewater architect might entail. And so that's a real job in the future of work that can help us grapple with one of the most vexing issues of our time. And that's to say nothing of, what's happening in the banking space or what's happening in the insurance industry, more prosaic industries of the now. And so again, I go back to my fundamental proposition that HR is at the crux of strategy for not only corporations today, but also, again, these really big pressing societal issues that we're all feeling in one way or another right now, right this minute. So future of work is always in the future, but it starts tomorrow, and there's things that we can do as HR practitioners to help put it into effect.
Well, Lisa has said, I sort of believe that the future of work is now, and in fact, that's the title of my next book. I think I'm collecting examples of jobs that seem to be in the future, but people are doing already, working with smart machines, etc. And I'll be very specific about one thing that I think HR organizations could do that now I've written, I don't know, 4 or 5 out of 40 or 50 of these descriptions of the future of work now. And in all of the ones I've encountered, there doesn't seem to be much focus on entry-level jobs in the future. You know, as machines do more and more of the straightforward tasks, I think you were mentioning that, Rob, we don't need entry-level people to do those things anymore. And so for over a decade, I've been asking people as they mention this, okay, so we'll still need experts in the future, people who can handle exceptions. I think you said that as well, Rob. What happens to the entry-level people? I mean, we already hear from college students that they, you know, have to come out of college with 5 years of experience or something, or they can't get a job, which is clearly impossible. So one thing I'd like to see HR organizations take on is, what do the entry-level jobs of the future in an organization look like, and what kind of people do we need to enter them and prepare for them?
Well, Rob, I'll just, you brought up a very valid point, and I'll tack onto that. Again, given that I've got a daughter that's getting ready to graduate here in a few short months, she's feeling some of those pressures. And, you know, as she's looking at opportunities to do internships and things like that, her last summer before graduating, there was a difference in what they were looking for back from when I was looking for internships, you know, and I think this is an opportunity, because to your point, people aren't coming out of school with 5 years of experience, but it's, again, it's an opportunity for us, not just as HR professionals, but as leaders at every level in an organization, to really look at, as we're thinking about reskilling the workforce, the rise of the soft skills. I'll be the first to admit to you, when somebody wants to come to work for Ceridian, I don't ever want to look at a resume. I don't care how much experience you have. You could be somebody who has 10 years of experience, and all you've done is repeat that 1 year of experience 10 years in a row. And so it's starting to think differently again about, what are the soft skills? Does this person have critical thinking capabilities? What is their emotional intelligence level? What is their affinity for learning? Those are things that, I don't care how many years of experience you have, can't be taught to somebody. They are things that people innately bring to the table. And if we can start changing our mindset a little bit, then to your point, the impacts of those entry-level roles going away is not nearly as profound, because we don't need people who come to us with 5, 7, 10 years of experience. We need people who have critical thinking capabilities, who are strategic in the way that they think through things, that can learn quickly, that can adapt to change at a rapid pace. That's not something, again, that you can be taught or can be captured on a resume. Those are things that people bring, and they can be enhanced and accentuated through the right education and learning abilities.
Hope it works for your daughter.
Oh, bless your heart. I need her off of my payroll.
By the hour, you can
on a daily
it,
basis,
right?
or
No, there's no on-demand pay for my 21-year-old at all.
So should we leave it on a short polemic? I'll pick up on something that Lisa said. They can be taught. I strongly believe we can and should attempt to hire people's EQs. We can and should attempt to make them, I know you said that, I'm being facetious, of course. We can and should make them think differently, because they need to. And that's it's the answer to your question. That's where HR will kind of spill into everyday life. That's how people are going to be in better shape from a mental point of view. That's how we're going to make a difference in general, because there's no more demarcation between work life and life in general. It's just life. And as long as we are in the workplace and we can help people get in better shape from these points of view, we should do that. So yeah, that's my answer. Thanks for setting it up, Lisa.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Well, I mean, you've shared some immensely important points, and I think the key message that's coming out already is, like, there is a sense of urgency, and all of you are leading by example and then helping others lead as well in this whole space. So if we could give the audience some hope, some excitement, but also some real inspiration to take it away and really be some of the leaders, join us all on this journey, what would it be? What would you say? Rob, can we start with you?
I think it's as we've said, it's having the agency in your hands to be able to take that first step. And I think before you can achieve it, you have to be able to dream it. And right now, for a lot of people, unfortunately, it's really difficult to see what the future of work looks like. What are the pathways? Where do they exist? Are people like me doing jobs of the future? Are people like me going into professions that I might have thought are unavailable to me? It's critical that we put a spotlight on where those pathways are. We were joking in preparation for this panel, sort of half joking, that, you know, one of the examples I was thinking about is, you know, if you're a funeral home director, but you thought, God, you know, I'd really like to be a data scientist, like, how do you get from here to there? And so I think about tools like we talked about education and training and L&D. You know, think about LinkedIn. The LinkedIn graph has theoretically those stepstones from here to there embedded into it. And how do we open that up and showcase the way to the future? If we don't do that, it's sort of societal malpractice. And so I think there is a lot to be hopeful about. It's just we have to shine as bright a light on it as we possibly can right now.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. Joanna, anything else to add to your current view of the world?
Let me put it on the bone. Happy to do that. I've already accepted it. I have to do that for the rest of my next 30, 40 years. Two things that we can and should be doing. One is focus on the team, and then on the psychological safety. That's going to make a humongous difference. And then secondly, we just have to change our current thinking and start focusing on what it is to be human, and allowing people to be human at work, and just letting them be authentic themselves, bring themselves to what we're asking them to do on a day-to-day basis, and then just kind of take it from there in a very agile state of mind.
Thank you, Duena. Tom, if you could unmute yourself, would be nice to hear your final thoughts.
I'll start barking, but I think with all of these systems that HR organizations have, it's important not to sort of lose touch with the people who work in your organization. So I think if I were head of HR, I would devote a good chunk of my time to going out and talking to people, trying to identify who's already doing some bold innovations in work, and maybe becoming the chief marketer for the fact that those exist in the organization, and showing that the organization is flexible enough to accommodate a wide variety of interests and capabilities.
Thank you, Tom. And Lisa, your thoughts, please.
You know, I talked earlier about stop thinking outside of the box and get rid of the box. The one thing that I see that as CHROs we do too frequently is we don't get started because we don't feel like we can do everything. So my recommendations to people is don't do nothing because you can't do everything. Say yes before you're ready. Plant the seed and be okay with the fact that you might not be there to watch that seed blossom and come to fruition. But you got to get started, and you can't get caught up in this paralysis of waiting until everything's perfect. I always equate it to having children. If I had waited to have children until I was completely ready, I'd have no children. I'd be yeah. I mean, so we've got to be uncomfortable in being uncomfortable, and realizing that is actually okay, and to just get started. Start small, eat the elephant one bite at a time, and move forward.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I mean, as I said, we could talk forever, and it would be such a delight and such a pleasure to have you on the screen forever. Unfortunately, we are coming to the end. I think there is huge amount of thought-provoking statements from all of you, amazing insights and experiences you could share. Thank you so much for it. I think there's definitely things we'll take away. We will be sharing some links, including to the Cognizant Index of the Future, and certainly taking away some of the new jobs that haven't even been created yet, like the algorithm bias auditor. I think that's going to be fascinating, put a whole new challenge on the HR function, but equally really make us shine and take everybody else on the journey, even if we are not ready. So take you by those words, Lisa. Let's be uncomfortable and be okay being uncomfortable. And from there on, the future can only be brighter. Thank you so much again. It's been a real honor. I feel really blessed. Rob, Joanna, Tom, and Lisa, And I hope you in the audience, I have enjoyed it as much as I have. Take away a lot of amazing thoughts and also inspiration to get into action. Enjoy the rest of the Hacking HR event. We truly believe it's joyful and it's an amazing experience, second to none. With all of this, thank you so much. And back to you, Enrique, the master behind the scene.
Thank you.